How does a software engineer turn a side project he worked on nights and weekends into a thriving business that generates over $300,000 in annual recurring revenue?
But there's usually one single marketing channel that will take your business from zero to something. And it's your goal to find that as soon as possible to make your business a success.
Meet Elston Baretto, a software engineer that had a streak of failed business ideas until he completely reversed his approach to launching products.
I set myself a limit of 1 month to build the project. And then I said I want to spend the rest of the time just marketing it.
Elston started Tiinyhost as a side project in 2019 after recognizing how overly complex web hosting was for non-technical users. I gave Elston a call to uncover exactly how he did it, and he revealed everything that worked for him, including the biggest key to his success and why it was not to spend more time coding, how he got fast and free feedback that completely changed the way he marketed his hosting business, and all the marketing ideas that he tried and which ones actually worked. This is Felix from Culture of Code. Let's dive in. Elston, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Felix. Great to be here.
Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. How did you start developing or indie hacking, working on your own software ideas, your own business ideas?
Yeah, I mean, it probably goes way back to when I was a teenager, just was really interested in building websites for people before I knew really what entrepreneurship was. I tried to kind of create like a games journalism website blog at one point. And it wasn't until I got into like the field of work, so graduated from university, where I realized that the path I really wanted to follow was more entrepreneurship rather than climbing up a corporate ladder. And then I essentially went through a period of creating different companies and failing until I landed on Tiinyhost, which was my first kind of attempt at building a SaaS by myself, no co-founders. I stumbled upon indie hackers a few times on that journey, and then also the indie London community, and then launched Tiny around that time.
Awesome. So you mentioned that Tiinyhost wasn't the first idea that just took off right off the bat. You had other ideas that you launched. Some had some success, some failed. How did you know when to move on from ideas? I think this is a challenging part where people have lots of ideas. Maybe they stick with an idea for too long, or maybe they move on too quickly. What's your process, or what did you learn about that process between deciding when to continue to dig in, continue to invest, or to quit and change directions?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the hardest things to do and judge, and it's a bit of an art really sometimes. I mean, with like the very first kind of made straight out of university, we probably worked on it longer than we should have, but then it just kind of fizzled out with the team, and we tried to get the YC and incubators and stuff like that. I think with Tiny, it was very different though, where I set myself a limit of 1 month to build the project. And then I said I want to spend the rest of the time just marketing it. I think it really took about maybe 6 to 8 months to really see something going. But in that 6 to 8 months, I saw trickles of success. People using it, saying this is the, a really cool product. And one of the things that really, did well for us is we were struggling in probably the first 1 or 2 months to get an audience and market ourselves. But what we did really well was we repositioned ourselves from a dev tool to a tool that was used for just non-technical users. It changed from like the simplest static host to like the simplest way to share web project online. And I wasn't ready to just give up on it straight away. But what I didn't do is just stay stationary in terms of the marketing, the positioning. The app slowly evolved on it, got feedback and rebased based on what we got. And then about 8 months later, found a marketing channel that worked, and then it kind of grew organically.
One thing you mentioned that you did differently this round was that rather than taking the often taken path that developers take, which is to focus on writing the code and shipping it and hoping that people use it, you gave yourself very little time to actually build the software, but then focus the rest of your energy on marketing instead. And that sounds like what was a big difference in your approach to Tiinyhost compared to your previous attempts. Tell us more about what that meant. Like when you were done, once you shipped that version that you're ready to start introducing to the world, what were you doing marketing wise, and what worked, what didn't work along the way?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a developer. I really knew absolutely nothing about marketing when I started off. And then I read a really good book called Traction by, I think it's Gabriel Weinberg. That book basically gives a list of different channels or ideas for marketing. So email outreach, SEO, blog posts, YouTube videos, all these kind of things. So what I decided to do is try everything. So I did everything from social media to posting on Twitter, creating videos. So Reddit was really, really useful for me early on to get like the first few hundred free users. I highly recommend that as a strategy to really launch your product. But engaging Reddit in the right way is tricky. You want to engage them from a point of feedback, not saying like, I build this, download my app. It's about being honest, saying there's a lot of subreddits like Entrepreneur, or SaaS and things like that, which really welcome people with projects and will give you feedback from it. But after that initial bump, it was just about trying everything. And I met a friend in the community who basically said, whilst I was trying everything, you should try SEO. And they were just kind of having a lot of success with it. And he kind of told me what they were doing with it as well. And I was like, okay, nothing to lose. So I tried it out, and 6 or 8 months later, basically started to kick in. And so I was trying a lot of things during that time frame. Forgot about SEO, and I was wondering like why it suddenly started growing by itself. That's because some of the things I was doing finally started being ranked on Google on the first page. And I just saw organic traffic coming through that way and doubled down on it. So the advice I usually give is basically marketing in the early days is like sprinkling seeds all over the internet and then doubling down on what's working. So there's no silver bullet here. You've got to try pretty much, everything out there. And then just focus on the one thing that's taking you somewhere, because you haven't, especially as an indie hacker, you haven't got the resources and capacity to try everything and continue everything. Or look at a competitor to see what they did earlier and see if we can kind of piggyback off that. But there's usually one single distribution channel, marketing channel that will take your business from zero to something. And it's your goal to find that as soon as possible to make your business a success.
So I want to think about SEO for hosting companies. It just seems like highly competitive. The paid search is probably crazy too with hosting. How did you figure out a way to make it work and what would seem like a pretty competitive landscape?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key components of it, or the tricks, is finding relevant keywords opportunities. So obviously, if you're new to SEO and a new website, you're not going to try to rank for web hosting or host, all that kind of stuff. You want to look at real like niche keyword opportunities. For example, things like static web hosting. It's hosting, but it's not the key term there, but it's something separate. And there's a lot of people that search for that stuff, and we rank really well for that as well. And so it's just figuring out like all these different opportunities. And you use tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs. They're expensive, but very, very powerful. And from those, you can basically find things that are relevant to your topic. And then it's really about creating content for that. So a lot of these opportunities, not everything is competitive in that industry. There's a lot of keywords and opportunities that are new, especially with AI. There's a whole new set of keywords which are coming out. And so once you find like a list, it's important to work on the content around that, build a reputation of your website up, and be patient, because this stuff takes time, especially if it's a new website. It's like any relationship. Like Google's a very powerful kind of beast, and it doesn't trust you, and for good reason. There's a lot of spam out there. So a relationship with Google takes time. It's about existing long enough, having other sites linking back to you, so guest posting, and also writing good high quality content, whereas blogs, landing pages, whatever it is, making sure that whatever content you produce services a query. So if someone is searching for static web hosting, you are a good static web host. It's simple as that. And just doing that on repeat until slowly gain more and more momentum.
That's awesome. So I want to talk about another strategy that you took before, which you mentioned that you tried, which was with Reddit. Do you remember what that early feedback was? What were some learnings that you got that was actually changed the direction or was actually impactful on the product that you worked on?
When I posted that, I had pretty much two audiences in terms of feedback. One style of response was, this is just like GitHub pages of Vercel or Netlify. Why would I need this? And then the other kind of types of responses were, wow, this is amazing. Like I never knew you could do this so easily. I had to maybe, work with a developer to do this, but I can do this myself. It's so quick. And I realized that one of the audiences was non-technical and one was technical. And so I just repositioned the brand or made things simpler than they needed to be. I removed the word kind of host from my page, just called it a simplest place to share your web project online. And now it's just the simplest way to share your work online, and just focus the product a little more on one audience than the other. And that feedback was from Reddit. And then something else that was super useful is just getting feature feedback. And so I launched it and people said, the first time I launched it, if you use Tiinyhost now, like you upload a zip file, a website or a PDF, it takes 10 seconds. But before, when the first time I launched it, it used to take me 10 to 15 minutes, basically, I think, to set it up. And the first feedback I got, this is cool, but it takes way too long to do that. And so I realized that really early on, it's about just speed, which is important. And then there were other feature requests like adding custom domains, analytics, and that kind of stuff. And it was a really easy way to speak to users, right? And figure out what the roadmap looked like. And those features I pretty much took and then put behind a paywall. And so there was a free version of the site, and all the features people requested for, I just put behind a paywall. And that turned out to be a monetization strategy.
Do you remember when you got your first paid users? Like, what was that experience
Yeah.
like?
You'll always remember your first, and it's never as satisfying as that first customer. And that was literally when we launched on Product Hunt. I launched it on Product Hunt. I think it was about 3 months later. I wasn't ready to launch on Product Hunt until maybe 3 months in. We had a discount code then. I think we got like one customer that day, which is amazing. And so that was super gratifying. It kind of showed me that people would actually pay for what I built after a few months. And now we get 20, 30 customers a day. At the beginning, it was a struggle just to get that first one. And it was when we launched on a big platform. And I think we made it to maybe top 3 product of the day or something at that point, which was super cool.
Yeah. So you worked on this on Tiinyhost. You worked on this while you already had another job working full time, and then you made the leap. Tell us more about when you were working on Tiinyhost and like how you found time, and energy to work on it alongside another obligation.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is up to your personal situation and your job, etc. But for me, I tried to, you know, I think I tried to aim for about 10 to 15 hours a week on it. And so this is like 1 to 2 hours, probably 2 hours a weeknight, maybe 3 or 4 days a weeknights, and maybe 3, 4 hours, 6 hours on a weekend, 3, 4 hours on Saturday or Sunday. And it was just that. But the thing that's super valuable about this strategy is that it forces you to focus. And I know many people, even, me, myself, I go through days where I just haven't done the right things or just wasted time when I knew I was more productive when I had a job. And that's because you're super laser focused. You don't have time to spend like an entire day on deciding the color of your logo or like the brand and that kind of thing. You just need to get customers or users or figure out if it's going to work or not. I had a friend of mine who spent like a week trying to design their logo, and the company never went anywhere later. And so the laser focus is super important. And also I say when you don't have time, you usually hopefully have money. And so hire people on Upwork, Fiverr, wherever you need, to help you get your job done. If you don't have the time to do certain things as well. And so you can actually, hire, part-time, software engineers as well, who can help you out all over the world. And they're very, very helpful, especially because they're essentially helping you ship when you can't. And so just following that strategy really helped. But I was really careful not to burn out. I always, attended, social stuff when I needed to or wanted to. So I rarely said no to anything kind of thing. But I was very structured on spending, hours a week just getting stuff done. And I'm a night owl, so I used to do it at the end of the day. People do it early morning, but it was just part of my flow.
Yeah, I think that makes sense that you were able to just carve out consistent time. Was it ever frustrating along the way where you were wishing you were making more progress but you just didn't have the time to do it? Like, how do you make
Yeah,
sure that you balance that as well?
100%. I mean, I think with that, it was just about, trying to catch up on weekends or just being honest with yourself. Like, this is as much I can do. It's not the end of the world. I'll get to it. And maybe your focus changes. But the converse also happens. Like, there were times where I was frustrated. I did everything, I could have, and I was frustrated with the product. And so I just needed to step away. And if I stepped away, I still had, everything else going on in my life. And so it never, I think if you had solely focused on that, then you'd feel really bad. Like you couldn't get away from it. And so, especially with SEO, which made a big difference, it took a lot of time. And there are times where I said, okay, I'm just going to not work, this week, or I'm going to step away from it for a few days and I'll come back with a fresh mind because I had that opportunity based on the circumstances. So
So you've made some improvements along the way and you've integrated some AI into Tiinyhost. I think you built your own GPT. Tell us more about what made you decide to do that. Like what functionality does it bring to the software?
Yeah, we stayed away from AI for a while, mainly because we didn't want to just be bolted on for marketing purposes. But a lot of interesting use cases have come in the last 6 months. Essentially, Tiinyhost, I think we're having kind of our NVIDIA moment in a sense. We've been around for a while, but right now there's so many new developers who weren't developers before, or app creators, builders, whatever you want to call them, can now go from a vision in their heads to prompt and code, which is automatically built for them. And so that's amazing. They can preview, they can edit it. But the biggest problem is now they don't know how to deploy it or host it. They don't even know what it means. And so we found a few people stumble upon us, exported stuff from Claude and GPT, and then put it on Tiinyhost, and they really appreciate it. So it's like this whole new audience now. This is amazing. And we started thinking more about that use case. And so GPT for a while, I think, well, they don't have a preview mode, but I think it's coming now. Like Claude, you can basically build some code and preview it. And so we wanted to really support that use case. So anyone could like start building apps with a prompt. And literally now it's on the GPT store. If you just type in like, build me an interactive quiz for Pokemon, for example, it will literally build you a quiz in 10 seconds. And then it'll actually host it on Tiinyhost. You'll have a link which is shareable. It has analytics in it. You can name it. You can password protect it. You can connect a custom domain, but it's there. It's like a proper live link. It's not a preview link from Claude that has you there. And you didn't need to know anything about programming or hosting and deploying. And so that is a super interesting use case because we are the hosting platform for non-technical users. And there's a whole another audience of users now who are now need to host stuff because they can build stuff and now they need to know where to put it. And so things like that are super useful and we're exploring that path.
So in the hosting space, I think you are just the nature of the business model is like a recurring subscription model, which is like a lot oftentimes like the holy grail of models, business models people want to get to, especially for SaaS. Can you say more about what you've learned about improving things like churn rate, making sure that the product is sticky and people continue to renew? Like, what have you learned about that?
I mean, when I came into this, I thought, yes, like it's just an obvious SaaS model, right? And there's a lot of apps out there which people complain should be one-time subscriptions and not monthly paying, but hosting is you pay for it because you get users and as long as your site is live. But it's not as sticky as people think because it is a very, very competitive space. People are constantly, trying to switch. And that's why you'll find like some of the big players, they usually have like really weird, complex pricing plans where it seems like it's $2, $3 a month, but you're effectively roped in for like a 24-month plan that you cannot cancel. And it's because they take all the money up front. They take a big annual and they basically get what they need. And so churn is something we're actually trying to work on. A lot of people, use this for one-time use cases. And we're constantly exploring like how do we add even more value from that as well. And so it's a lot about helping people get on custom domains, helping people make more use of this. And specific use cases as well. So like if you're hosting a restaurant menu on us, you're going to be longer than if you're running a prototype basically. And so it's focusing also on the right audiences because we get a lot of users from different demographics and types of industries, but only specific ones are better. So we're really focusing on that, but it's a hard problem and it's the nature of the industry as well.
I'll leave this last question. Given your experience over the many years that you have launch businesses and your success that you have now at Tiinyhost, if you wanted to build a SaaS and you just had to start from scratch from all over again, but you want to do a SaaS, you don't have an idea yet, how would you go from that starting point to having a paid customer as quickly as possible? Like, what would you do? Like, what did you learn that was a waste of time? What did you learn that was a good use of time? And how would you do that from now to like an actual paying customer?
Yeah, a very good question. I mean, just the landscape and the scenery is always changing. And so what worked, for me when we first launched Tiny probably isn't as useful as it is now. There's a whole new ballgame with AI and influencers kind of thing. I mean, one thing I would do probably now is very hard to go from 0 to 1. And so if you have the opportunity, there are actually marketplaces where you can just buy a very low running SaaS and then scale it. And so I think that's a way easier way, even if it has a few customers or has some traffic on it. if you see something and you think, oh, I can make this better, that's a really good way if you have some investment. If you don't, I would really focus on the influencer and AI space. And so there's a lot of interesting apps coming out now which are partnered with influencers. And so they rock it basically because the influencer has the audience and there's a good builder or indie hacker who can build good product for them. And so those apps are doing really well right now. And AI apps as well, just in general. I don't know, how long this hype curve will last, but there's a lot of opportunities which weren't possible before, like little tools which with AI that can work well. But the same stuff also does work. Email marketing, SEO, it's not gone away. Effectively, like SEO isn't going to be as useful as it was because of now Perplexity and all these GPT recommendations. But actually, GPT recommends us when people ask, like, what's a simple hosting solution? And we didn't train the GPT to do that. Where did that come from? It came from SEO. And so there is that foundation, which is still there. That's still powerful. And so same thing, like I would launch an idea basically, but I'll try lots of different marketing approaches to it. And if you can, team up with an influencer. So there's multiple ways to build a product, and it really depends on your personality, your use case. I think the best successful ones I've seen these days is find an audience first, find an influencer and partner with them to build an app with them, or just try what I did, which was like launch something and get it out to as many people as possible and then iterate on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Elston. Thanks for coming on, for sharing your journey, your advice, and your experience with us.
Yeah, no problem, Felix. Thanks a lot.